Welcome to the Creeping Rainbow in Comics. I'm Mike Partika, and today we're going to be exploring the DC Universe's coming out. Oh, yes, this was an absolutely subtle and genius metaphor for acceptance, celebration, normalization of homosexuality. It's one of the most sublime metaphors that I've ever seen a comic book company put out there. And what we're going to be looking at specifically is the 12-issue series Doomsday Clock by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. It is the thematic sequel to the 1985 series Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. Now, this series, by the way, was originally based on the Charlton characters that DC had acquired from Charlton Comics, including Captain Atom, Nightshade, The Question, Blue Beetle, Peter Cannon, Thunderbolt, and Peacemaker, who is now the star of his own series on HBO Max, having debuted in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Now, these characters map pretty much onto the main characters of the Watchmen universe: Dr. Manhattan, Silk Spectre, Night Owl, Rorschach, Comedian, and Ozymandias. And the key points of the Watchmen story, I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of it because it's really good and you should read it if you get the chance, is that the world is teetering on the brink of nuclear annihilation, and several superheroes come out of retirement to investigate the murder of one of their own, leading them to uncover horrible secrets and a grand conspiracy. So, Watchmen, pick it up if you do get a chance. And if you do, what you will find is that in the first issue of Watchmen, there is a scene held in a restaurant in which two of the characters, Silk Spectre and Night Owl, in their civilian identities, are having dinner in the restaurant. And in a blink and you'll miss it kind of moment, in the foreground, there's a gay couple. Now, this series came out in 1985 when you didn't really see expressions of homosexuality in comics all that much. And for some reason, this struck a chord in Jeff Johns, the writer of Doomsday Clock, and he decided that he was going to include some gay themes in Doomsday Clock. But first, before going over this, I really ought to talk about the origins of Doomsday Clock itself. Where did this series come from, and why was it decided that DC ought to publish a thematic sequel to Watchmen? Well, it all goes back to Jeff Johns' series Flashpoint. And this is actually the basis for the upcoming Ezra Miller Flash movie. In Flashpoint, the character of the Flash finds himself in a parallel universe filled with characters who are similar to, but very, very twisted forms of the superheroes and supervillains that he knows from his own universe. So he has to figure out who went back in time and screwed things up so that this darker version of the DC universe was created. Now, of course, at the end of the series, he manages to undo all the damage, but in the process of undoing the damage, he finds out that the DC universe was not configured as it should have been in the first place. And when all the pieces finally snap into place, what we got was the New 52. So the New 52 was a much more streamlined and pared down version of the DC universe that had been in publication for a long time now. In the New 52, you had much younger heroes and more inexperienced heroes. Instead of having these grand sweeping careers that they'd previously had, where you had all of this backstory to keep current with, instead, you had all of these heroes, with the exception of maybe Batman, having only been around for 5 years and forming the Justice League, and then now they don't have all of the old connections, all of the old relationships, and a lot of the legacy of the DC universe was lost as well, especially looking both into the past and future. In the past, there was no Justice Society preceding the Justice League. You only had the Justice League being the dawn of Earth's heroes. So you didn't have things like the Golden Age version of the Flash or the Golden Age version of Green Lantern. You just had the main DC universe. And then looking into the future, you didn't have the Legion of Superheroes, who are the thematic descendants of the Justice League and Justice Society. You didn't have this sense that what is happening in the present really reverberates back through the past and through the future. You were just really set on this one particular narrow slice of time, the 5 years that these superheroes had been in business. Now, of course, fans just absolutely threw a shoe when this was revealed. People bought into the New 52 at first, but they found it to be kind of a sterile and dead world because all of the long-standing relationships and all of the complexity of the DC universe that longtime fans of DC Comics had come to appreciate was now removed. And so you had more of this flat, hollow DC universe. And fans increasingly clamored for a reversal, of course. And Jeff Johns found himself in the unenviable position of having to write his own reversal. So the DC Universe Rebirth special was Jeff Johns reversing course and basically saying that, okay, yeah, the universe as it is, this New 52 universe, is actually not the DC universe the way it's supposed to be. In fact, somehow the Watchmen universe impacted on the DC universe and caused it to become the New 52. So the investigation of how all that happened would then be taken up in the series Doomsday Clock by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. So the key points in Doomsday Clock, which is now the thematic sequel both to Watchmen and also the continuation of Rebirth, which is going to reverse DC's New 52 universe. The key points of this series is that, as before, the world is teetering on the brink of nuclear annihilation. That's similar to Watchmen. But now it's thanks to the New 52s having isolated superheroes from one another. They don't have this level of trust among one another that they used to have, which results in superheroes getting involved in international incidents, especially superheroes from other countries impinging on other countries' business. And now you've got an international crisis that is looming towards the world's annihilation, not just because of these super heroic weapons of mass destruction, but also because of mankind's normal arsenal as it is. Now, during Doomsday Clock, we learned that the DC universe has been altered, resulting in its legacy portions, both past and future, and all of its long-developed character relationships disappearing. So the Watchmen universe has impinged on the DC universe and caused this wiping out and this sowing of distrust and despair throughout the DC universe. Well, naturally, by the end of the series, the alterations to the DC universe are undone, which restores the legacy portions that had disappeared along with characters' memories of their long-standing relationships. So now all of this starts flooding back, and you can best see it summarized in the picture of Superman fighting alongside the Legion of Superheroes and the Justice Society of America. So it all comes back. Now, one of the things that Watchmen and Doomsday Clock have in common, aside from the thematic elements of nuclear annihilation and things like that, is that both of them contain a subplot, a very subtle subplot that, when you explore it, ties to the larger theme of the book. In the case of Watchmen, this was expressed in Tales of the Black Freighter. This was kind of presented as a comic within a comic. And in Tales of the Black Freighter, you had the tale of a person who's lost at sea and must do such dreadful things to survive that he no longer feels at home with humanity. I mean, the guy's basically got to practically turn cannibal and sail on a raft of corpses to get home. And by the time he's done, he's so detached from his basic humanity that he just doesn't feel at home with people anymore. And we find out towards the end of the book that this Tales of the Black Freighter, it is really the unconscious or subconscious feelings of one of the main characters in the book, who similarly has had to do dreadful things for what he feels is the greater good. Now, in Doomsday Clock, we have a similar subplot, but that subplot is the mystery of Carver Coleman. Carver Coleman is first introduced to us in the first or second issue of Doomsday Clock as an actor who stars as another comic book character, Nathaniel Dusk. And he has a series of movies. And at the end of that series, or during the production of the final film in the series, he's murdered, and his death remains one of Hollywood's most brutal unsolved murders. So, who is this Carver Coleman guy? Well, the more we learn about him, the more we realize that he has a secret. And someone knows that secret. So, on June 1st, 1954, he finds a letter that threatens to expose his darkest secret. And then, a little over a week later, he's found dead in his own home. And the housekeeper who finds him takes the letter and burns it so that we never, or that history never finds out why it was that he was murdered. Now, it is revealed to us why he was murdered and who the murderer is and the blackmailer is. Well, it turns out to be his own mother. And she and her friend are trying to blackmail him for money so that she won't expose his secret, whatever that is. Now, we're finally given the letter that she writes to him, and in the letter, it is revealed what it is that he's hiding. It says, I received the wire you sent last month. Unfortunately, I have run into additional financial difficulties, so this sets up the reason that she's blackmailing him for more money. You told celebrity stars that you saw in old Arizona and were inspired to move out to Hollywood, but you didn't leave because you were inspired by a movie. I kicked you out because I caught you and Billy in your room together. I wonder what celebrity stars would think of that. Meet me at Trader Vic's at 10 p.m. to discuss additional payment, or I will have no choice but to sell my story. Well, so as it turns out, Carver Coleman is gay, and he's closeted. He's like Rock Hudson. He's a closeted celebrity actor, and he's been hiding it this whole time. Now, towards the end of Doomsday Clock, when you have the DC universe getting restored, you also have this scene between the Watchmen character Dr. Manhattan and Carver Coleman. And it turns out that they've had a relationship in terms of a yearly friendly meeting at this particular roadside diner that they've gone to for years. And in this last meeting between the two of them, Dr. Manhattan advises Carver Coleman that instead of hiding, he should reveal who he is. Don't be afraid of what you feel. And so in the restored DC universe that results at the end of Doomsday Clock, you have a showing of the Nathaniel Dusk Marathon featuring Carver Coleman, and it talks about how he came out of the closet to the public during the final Nathaniel Dusk film. So instead of submitting to the blackmail and being murdered for his homosexuality, he instead comes out of the closet, finishes the movie, and then he winds up losing pretty much almost everything. But he returns to acting and becomes even more famous than ever, and he also becomes a pro-gay activist. And so he winds up finding someone to live with and winds up living out the rest of his life happy. So it turns into one of these it gets better stories. You come out of the closet and it gets better. So in The Mystery of Carver Coleman, you have the tale of a closeted gay actor who's blackmailed and murdered, but his fate improves when he instead comes out of the closet. Now, you have to realize, though, that this is not just an isolated tale. This is just like Tales of the Black Freighter, where you're reflecting on, the larger theme of what's happening with one of the main characters of the book. In The Mystery of Carver Coleman, you're actually seeing a reflection of the DC universe itself. And the message that Geoff Johns is trying to convey, and I swear it hit me like a thunderclap when I realized it, was that The Mystery of Carver Coleman expresses the theme that the DC universe has essentially been in the closet since the end of Flashpoint. In other words, all of these legacy elements that made the DC universe this enriching and fulfilled place were shoved into the closet, and that resulted in the more sterile and dead New 52. Or if you want to reverse the equation, you could say that the New 52 plus LGBTQ pride, is metaphorically speaking, equals the DC universe that we all know and love. In other words, this is supposed to be perfection when you take the basic elements of the DC universe and you gay it up. Which is completely ass backwards to anybody who has a grasp on reality. Because if you look at what they're trying to push as normal these days with this gender unicorn that they show to kids in the hopes of, getting them into queer theory or whatever else there is out there in terms of gender expression, gender identity, sex assigned at birth, who you're physically, emotionally attracted to. It can be just all completely over the map, and this is just the way that the world is. But it's not the way the world is supposed to be. If you subtract out all of the LGBTQ stuff, that's when you get what the world is supposed to be. Not gendered unicorns, but gender humans. Men and women who, across the board, are consistently male and female in their proper roles, in their proper bodies and minds and everything. And this is what would be equivalent in comic book terms to the New 52. But we know that the New 52 was not something that readers liked. They found it sterile, they found it dead. It wasn't lively. It was way too, dead-brained. It didn't show the wonderful complexity of things. And that's how a lot of people look at this particular representation of humanity. They think, oh, well, in a world that's, if there's no gay, if there's no trans, if there's no genderqueer or intersexed or anything like that, my gosh, what a boring, what a tragic, what a sterile, what a dead world that is. Well, except that if you actually meditate on this thought and you think, what if human beings were all like this? What if human beings were such that if you saw someone presenting as a woman, you knew it was a woman. If you saw someone presenting as a man, you knew it was a man. And not only that, but the man and woman themselves would know that they were a man and a woman. You would not have gender dysphoria. And then not only that, but you would also know what type of person that man or woman was attracted to, because that would be consistent with his or her sex as well. You would know that the women are attracted to men and the men are attracted to women. So you would have cisgender, straight people, men and women across the board. And if you contemplate on that kind of world for 10 minutes, you would realize that what you're looking at is heaven on earth. But there are people who don't think that way. There are people who actually think that this mess is representative of perfection, that this is somehow the ideal that we should be shooting for, where things are just all over the map and you've got other categories as well as any kind of mix of expressions. And that's why when you look at the DC universe that they presented in the near future, you have a gay Aquaman, you have a bisexual Green Lantern, you have a bisexual Superman, and a non-binary Flash. That is what they are pushing for. They're pushing this on kids and saying this is the new ideal for humanity, where everything is just anything you want it to be. And they're totally taking you away from the truth, which is that in a perfect world, everybody would be like this. And you have to ask yourself, if comic books are going to be pushing this instead of this, do you want your kids reading those comics? Well, your mileage may vary. I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching this latest installment of The Creeping Rainbow in Comics, featuring the DC universes coming out in the series Doomsday Clock. Please do subscribe if you haven't already so that you can catch future episodes of this and my other content, and I will talk to you later.